My name is Earl Mann, and I am thankful to be your host on today's conversation, and I thank the universe for bringing you to me. Today we're going to talk about one of the three most dominant things I think that carve our paths as humans. We're going to talk about the thing that is the background of the futures when we imagine them. The thing that is the foreground of the present that we stand in, and the thing that owns the voice that whispers to us on our journey all of our lives. What I'm talking about is fear. Today we're going to talk about fear, and I hope to talk about fear in a slightly different way that might be a little bit more enlightening and empowering than the way we normally look at our friend, Mr. Fear. A different way I've found to look at fear that I find to be much more insightful and empowering than the normal way we address fear. And to do that, I'm going to channel my alter ego, the Dark Knight, Batman, right? And it's just an interesting way. I was doing this live at a coaching session one day, and this new idea we were talking about fear. I was in this conversation about fear, and this metaphor just came in the moment, and it resonated so deeply and so profoundly that it became to be one of my favorite ways of talking about fear. And if you know anything about the Batman story, not to really get into that, but the part that is relevant is that this guy becomes a hero when he embraces what he fears most, right? This guy Bruce Wayne fell into a well as a kid. Bat scared him, terrified him. And then later in his life, after tragedy and etc., when he decides to become something greater than he is, a hero, so to speak, he decides to take on the persona of that which he feared most. So even in this comic tale, you see this theme of embracing, overcoming. And in this case, not only did he overcome a fear, he actually embraced that fear as a part of his persona. And that became the hero for others around him. And it was in my talking about that little episode that we kind of kept going down the conversation. And it's the idea, and bats actually became the source of insight and my new distinction on fear. And if you know anything about bats, bats have radar. They can actually sense. They have like a radar, and that's how they sense insects, and they can sense their environment, and that's how they kind of navigate through the dark. They have this radar. And let's talk. And I think we have a similar type of thing. So we're going to imagine that we have a similar type of mechanism. So let's talk about how we might be able to apply it, how this radar might be, this idea of a radar, this radar metaphor might be a powerful new way to look at fear. So first of all, what we're talking about are minor fears. We're not talking about big fears like, fear of snakes or fear of flying. I'm not even talking about major fears. I'm talking about the little minor fears, the ones that happen all the time in our lives, the ones that we can all relate to without risking our lives, right? What I'm talking about are things that make us feel uneasy, anxious, that feeling that we often call butterflies. It's that thing in the gut that makes us feel uneasy. So those butterflies, most people can relate to that. That's what they feel when something's about to happen. They need to go talk to the boss, or they need to speak to this group of people, or they need to stand up to the bully, or they need to, go see this person that they have romantic interest in. Whatever the situation, there's this very common feeling that most humans can relate to, which we refer to as butterflies, this uneasiness, this uneasiness we fear. So here's the metaphor, and here's the idea I'd like you to consider. I'd like you to consider this as a way to look at fear. What if, let me give you a little bit more background as to why this came to be. So there's this other idea that the humans have the ability to make very accurate decisions with seemingly very little data. With seem a lot of the times we feel that we are making decisions based on instinct, and we're actually making them on very observation, and our brain doing some powerful brain stuff, brain magic, and basically doing some very good math and making fairly accurate predictions. In fact, I believe there's a book, I think this idea was called thin slicing in a book called Blank. If you've never read that book, I highly recommend that you do it. But it's about this unbelievable seeming ability for humans to, in the blink of an eye, make some very accurate assessments around things that on the surface looks like you're using intuition or gut feeling. But what they're finding is that your brain is just so powerful that you actually do take in enough information for your brain to calculate a fairly accurate prediction. So it's pretty scientific. It's not as mystical as it may seem in some cases. So that's a little background. That was a little background to my distinction. So that's in the background of my mind when I'm thinking about this whole bats and radar idea and this butterfly things we have. And then it dawned on me, wow, wait a minute. Most people feel these butterflies when something's about to happen, right? That's the thing that we can know to be pretty much consistent, right? You're about to speak in front of that crowd. You feel this uneasiness. You feel these butterflies. You feel that fear. And we call this fear by many different names. It makes us nervous. It makes us uneasy. It's just a different word we use to describe fear, because that's what it is. It's actually fear. So we have this thing about to happen, and we feel what we perceive to be fear. Now, most people think the standard way of approaching this would be to think that, wow, we feel fear because we know that something bad may happen, right? We don't want to talk to the boss because we know that it may go wrong, it may go bad, and bad things may ensue. We don't want to talk in front of the crowd because something bad is going to happen. By the way, 90% of Americans have a fear of public speaking, which is, when you think about it, pretty irrational, because what's the worst that can happen, right? But most of us have that fear. And most people would think, well, something bad could happen, maybe embarrassment, or whatever. The same with taking a chance in romance or standing up to a bully. We feel this fear rise. And for most people, they think that uneasiness is an indicator that, hey, something bad may happen, so we may not want to go down this path. What if that's not what was happening? What if something completely different was happening? What if, remember the whole thin slicing idea, remember our ability to perceive, grab the information, calculate very fast, predict very accurately. What if our sensory brain, our human capability was so clear that when something happened and a situation appeared, a scenario formed before us, we found ourselves at the doorstep of some possible activity. What if we calculated in that moment that could lead to something good, but the feeling we felt that was, based upon our past experience, it is very likely that we will not do it. Think about this now. What I'm saying is, what if those butterflies you feel were the fear that came up because your higher self realized that, wow, this is something that will really matter. It will really accelerate or propel you forward to this place you want to be, this thing you want to become. But it is very likely you may not do it. And boom, that's why you feel all queasy. What if this opportunity, speaking in front of this crowd, is going to be that moment that changes your direction, but the chances are you're going to back away from it? What if going in and asking your boss for that promotion, for that job, this is the right time, you've earned it and it's ready, but the chances are you are not going to do that, so you feel this fear. What if taking a chance on romance, this is the one, that's the one, everything indicates that might be your soulmate, but the chances are you're going to, for some reason, not take that action. And what if that's what's going on? What if this queasiness, this butterflies we feel, were our radar, but not the radar of bad things happening, the radar of possible good things happening? Let that sink in and think back across your life. If, suppose that was true, how different would you now approach things? Here's what I like about this metaphor. Be it right or wrong, I challenge you to prove it out in your life or experiment with it. But think about it. Which person would be most likely to face a fear? The one when they feel this butterflies flickering, they back off of it because they think something bad might happen? Or the person, when they feel those butterflies flickering, they realize, wow, this is a moment that really matters. I need to push forward. One way of looking at fear is massively empowering, and the other one, for many, is disabling. The human potential and capability, we're just getting our mind around the extent of how amazing we are, of the amazing capabilities we have. With our mind and our sensory and our perception, all these things are coming together. We're learning more now than we ever have in history. And maybe some of the things we just take for granted are not what they actually appear to be. So that's the challenge in this conversation around fear. That's the challenge, that what if we have this built-in radar that can tell when a moment is significant? What if we can tell when a moment matters? But what if the goodness in us, the higher self in us, that voice in us that is constantly trying to get us to become more, when they see this scenario forming right before us, and it knows that most people back away from it, what if it triggers you to make you pause and recognize it and understand that it's there? Then if that's the case, the reason I like this metaphor is because some of you might think back to this conversation and think to yourself, wait a minute, what good thing could this possibly be the threshold to? What good thing, what great thing might this be the doorway to? And for some of you, something might come to mind, and the fear of losing that might be greater than the fear of taking that action and dealing with that minor fear. And if it is, you will find the courage to deal with that fear. You will find the courage to ask for that promotion. You will find the courage to stand up to that bully. You will find the courage to start that business. You will find the courage to reach out and hold her hand, or let him hold yours. You will be inspired and empowered by the possibility that you're standing on the edge of. And you will be grateful that you have the built-in radar system, the mechanism to let you know when you are there. My friends, I hope this is a different and unique way for you to look at fear, what it is, and how we deal with it. It is pervasive. It has always been there in your life, regardless of how big you are, how great you are, how rich you are, how poor you are, how strong you are, how weak you are, how much you believe or disbelieve in whatever that is you believe in. It has always been there, and it will always be there. So my suggestion to myself, if it's going to be with me for every step of my journey, maybe it makes sense for me to find a way to make it my friend.